This is just like an organism.
Well, what are the spring rates on it now?
I've never even told anyone. Those 4 things, and you will have a car that surprises you.
Today I'm here with Alex Bernstein. What's going on, Alex?
How's it going, man?
Let's start with what year car this is.
This is a 2008 BMW M3 e92.
What they have different packages, right, for the M3s?
This is I guess this kind of came the most desirable spec for some. It's called the stripper pack. Don't get any ideas, but they call this a single hump dash. Anytime you see another hump there, that's a car with navigation, way more weight, way more wiring, iDrive, all of that stuff. This also came with the carbon roof, so no sunroof. Came with cloth seats, manual seats, very, very few electronic, and then the manual. It's literally like, this is the most bare bones, all performance E92 you could buy at the time. I think the next one up from here would just be this same car, but DCT. The DCT cars are a little heavier, so.
Tell me how you got into like tracking and such.
I'll try to find the short version, but yeah, I feel like I've been around cars and motors my whole life, from go-karts to like go-peds to all of it. I realized after college that I just wanted to go be around cars all the time. I wanted to shoot cars, I wanted to write about cars, so I worked at car magazines for a number of years. But even as a kid, like with my learner's permit, I bought a Volkswagen GTI, like my first car, started going to autocross. That was the only place I could really drive without a full license, so they like let me drive around a parking lot. And then they were like, I guess you're good, you could figure it out. So I tried to compete in like nationals at that point, and like I would just go to all these events and learn about like car control and eyes up. But I was also super into street racing. I mean, it was bad. Like Long Island, New York was kind of notorious for that, and there's so many generations of street racers there. So like I got into more modern and turbocharged cars, but there was a lot of old school muscle dudes too, and 4 a.m. meetups like off the freeway. Like it was crazy. So I loved building cars with obscene power too. So like I've done a lot of different things, from like starting with autocross, dumb horsepower, kind of track spec street race cars, to somewhere back in the middle. But it took me a while to find my way back to a racetrack and really start to like push as a driver. And that's only been happening 5-6 years, like more intense track driving.
Okay. What was your first track car?
I mean, I had that GTI on track at one point. I drove it at Lime Rock. I blew an intercooler coupler there, and I was like, I didn't even know what I was doing, but I was like, well, it's really slow now without boost, but I just kept driving it NA. That's actually really bad to do on a turbo car, so lesson learned there. But yeah, my first kind of all-out track build, I'd say, was an Evo 9 MR.
Evo 9, okay.
Yeah, that car was amazing, but again, I'd never really like got to push it on a track. Years later, moved out to California and went nuts with an E46 M3 build. I let Mike Essa drive that for me actually in the European Car Grand Prix, because I was nervous to compete against all these like shop cars and drivers. But this is stuff where I look back and I'm like, knowing what I know now and like loving driving as much as I do and being as comfy as I am behind the wheel, I'm like, what was I doing? Why? No offense, Mike, he did okay.
Now here we are with the E92.
Yeah, I think this might be my 17th car. So like I've had a lot of cars, and I typically go through them every 2 or so years. Yeah, this one's special, man. I don't know. I have no plan to get rid of it. I've never enjoyed pushing a car or developing a car, driving a car as much as I've enjoyed this one.
So you've had obviously E46, E92. Which one do you think is a better platform?
Yeah, I mean, I say it a lot, and people are like, are you just doing that for, you know, Sub2 Speedhouse and business? But I'm like, no joke, man. I don't think BMW will ever come out with a cooler M car that kind of does everything. You know, like this gives you a bit of like nostalgia. This motor has like F1 pedigree. Like it's so special, man. An 8,600 RPM V8 with ITBs, like no one's doing that. You could only get that in like, you know, Ferraris and crazy cars. Weight for weight, power for power, torque for torque, like the E92 wins every time. No doubt, like E46 is a good chassis and you can be quick in them, but I just think this is the superior, you know, evolution, and I just enjoy driving it the most.
Okay.
And I also had an E82, you know, 135i, which has a lot of part sharing from this chassis. I converted that to like a 1M clone, and that car made 550 wheel with an N54, you know, single turbo. And that really is what kind of started my taste into hardcore track driving and like competing in time attack. I ran GTA in that car, and that's when the bug really like bit me on this end, because like I was always modifying cars and wasting all my time and energy and money on cars. But as far as like being interested in time attack and really pushing, and it was that car for me. But that car also taught me a lot about car control and what you don't want in a track car. And for me, that is, I don't want a crazy, finicky, turbocharged track car. At least not with having my own shop and like full support and a team, and the car has a place to go after every event and be looked after, because like, it's just brutal, man. You know, that on an N54, it was really brutal. And for me, I was like, I knew I was having a baby, and I wanted to continue doing what I love, which is driving. So I'm like, how do I continue doing what I love without so much worry on the car side? So got rid of that, and I'm like, I'm gonna do an N8 thing and take a 200 horsepower hit and see if I can be just as quick. And it turns out a couple years later, you could do it.
So you just did a sub 50 on this car. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What was the most helpful modification for you to do that?
That's a tough question, and no one's ever asked me before. There are so many pieces to the puzzle, and again, the reason I started Sub2 Speedhouse was because of this very thing, where people, I think, naively or just hopefully think that maybe it is just one part that's gonna like get you there and like crush your lap times. But this is just like an organism. You know, like you really need things to work cohesively. Everything from your alignment to your dampers to your settings, how much nitrogen you have in your canisters, your spring rates, rake, all of these things then comes down to tires, and then you have to top it all off with like, can I beat on the car? Can I push myself as a driver? Can I get enough seat time to figure out where I'm missing out on this time here, you know, at this stupid track that we keep going back to? Yeah, it's a lot, and I mean, I think we also see really commonly like someone gets close to the goal, whether you ran a 201 and you're like, I'll ran a 59 next time, like I got it. Or you run a 152 and you're like, we're knocking on the door of sub 50, but like it is just not that. That's why we keep going back, because you think you're gonna win. But it's really challenging. I think it took me an entire year, because I was that person, like literally almost a year ago to the day, I went out with SoCal Drivers Club, was just dialing in like the new 3-way MCS setup, and ran a 150.09. 0.09, dude.
That's brutal.
Like, you know what that does to you? And not only that, but I ran 6 more 150 point something laps within that one day. And I'm like, I'm right there. In a kind of a cocky, stupid way, I was like, I know what the car's missing. So I thought I could make changes and not only show up in sub 50, but just crush it right after that. Yeah. And what that did was take me on a year-long journey getting further from my goal until very recently. Okay. So I figured it out. But yeah, short answer, you need to have the right damper setup, man. These cars need it. It's a heavy car. It's got a big engine in the front of it, and you just need to be able to control it.
All right. Well, show us through the car.
Sure.
I guess we can start. Let's start with the brand Sub2 Speedhouse. What does Sub2 Speedhouse do?
I realized after I started pushing this car in my old 1 Series, I was just getting bombarded with messages daily, whether it was like Instagram or from the forums, because like I have these really lengthy, you know, pretty detailed build threads. Just from my magazine days, like it makes me feel, it's very therapeutic for me to write, and I have no problem using words, so like I'll write a lot on these build threads, share a ton of photos and like my whole journey with like full transparency. So what that created was this kind of following that like I was super grateful for and surprised about. And then as I started seeing the lap times drop and people started realizing, you know, what the car was capable of, I was just kind of handing out my research, like, and a lot of it, it's a lot of time. Yeah. You know, and a lot of it is trial and error. Like I would go on the forums and people would say, you can't fit a tire bigger than a 245 on a 1 Series. I'm like, cool, I'm gonna try to do 265 square and stock fenders. Like I like to push it and not listen to the forum, and then people will follow suit. So I just realized that people wanted my help or were asking for my advice, and I was kind of sending them off to go buy parts wherever they wanted, and sometimes make mistakes on their own, learn a lesson, come back, cry about it, whatever. But I think everything I learned was that it's about having a cohesive formula. Why is there no store that exists that has a cohesive formula where like I don't need to go look down an aisle at Costco for like 87 different kinds of water bottles? Like I just want one. So I started Sub2 Speedhouse to be exactly that. It's a super hyper-curated array of parts from brands that I work with already, that are on this car, that I know work, and I know that they're successful, and I know their quality, and they can take abuse, and it's all in one place. So like I'm hoping to remove that trial and error. I'm hoping people can look at it and say, wow, that's some expensive stuff, but if I don't need to buy 3 of these things, you know, if you don't need to buy coilovers 2 times before you end up with an MCS damper, you did the right thing. I ultimately just want to help people navigate it and kind of be a friend to talk to, because that's what I realized I was being for people. If you don't have guidance and it's a lot of noise, whether you see something on YouTube or a forum or Instagram, you're just trusting like a million sources, and you could end up with like a complete mash of a car that just isn't working right. Whether it's me or you or some other dude or a girl, you need to really mostly trust one person if you're gonna seek guidance. Because if you start getting it from everyone, it's difficult. So
Yeah.
that's all I aim to do. It's kind of consulting and part selection. Nice.
This is the place to go to. Hit them up. Let's start with the exterior, wherever you want to start.
Yeah, we can just walk around. I'm really big on style. Like I don't think race cars should be ugly. I love like Japanese time attack, and I'd say my earliest influences though were more factory built GT4 spec cars. And then my favorite thing on those cars is just before they have a livery applied to them, which is why I love like a naked white factory-ish looking race car. Huge emphasis on that stuff, but this all kind of snowballed, I mean, as it does. This is a Motorsport 24 carbon hood. You can only get these in Germany. They don't even fit that well, but it's so cool looking, man. I love it. And the aero catch and kind of how it all goes together. Some people do cheesy stuff with the vents. Like I just like everything white. Motorsport 24 hood that shaves like I think 10 pounds from the front end. These are Flossman fenders, actually from my buddy Chris Mayfield, who had an e92 as well. Sometimes you're just talking to a friend and he's like, I got these sitting around. I'm like, let's do it. Not fun to install. Functional, probably. They're fiberglass, but again, more vents, better, right?
Right.
Front bumper is seen better days. That's gonna have to get repaired, but this is a Bimmer World front lip and canard setup. I'd say this is 90% looks right here. Like it just looks so cool, but as far as function, it's not a real splitter. They call it a splitter, but it's not splitting a lot. Like this is pulling on the bumper itself. It's not chassis mounted. And underneath, it kind of mates up to the mess of the stock belly pan, but there's no tunnels, there's no end fences, nothing. So is it an improvement over having nothing? Probably, but it is not at all what this car needs. And I've done a lot of crazy things to the car and the chassis to get it to behave without the front aero that it requires. So it's been cool. I just think it is the coolest looking front lip for this platform, because everyone runs those GT4 lips and then they have a hole right here for brake ducts. First off, no one I know needs actual brake ducts here. Like you just don't need it. Second, half the time or more than that, they're not hooked up at all. You could just see the ground from underneath. And third, you're actually hurting the aero, because now you have another thing that's just, you know, open.
The fenders, are they actually wider or
No,
they're the same, right?
They are the same. I mean, it's tough with this car. It's not the widest, you know, setup, but to go wider here, you ultimately would need to get rid of this attachment point because this is really the problem area. And this is where the bumper meets the fender. So what the GT4 cars used to do actually was completely trim out this lip and radius, this entire thing.
Oh,
Just like this, which kind of we call self-clearancing. Like you can see rubber here anyway. I mean, it already happens. So that's one option. I have some ideas of what I can do in the future to finesse the tire package, but yeah, they are not any wider. They're just lighter and have a lot of ventilation. And then yeah, out back, nothing here, man. It's just like a mild fender roll, which I only just recently did, and I regret it. But the way I got to sub 50 was realizing I needed better gearing. So I ran a much taller tire in the rear. And as you can see, it's beefy.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make sure I wasn't going to cut through it or ruin anything. So I rolled them a little bit. So yeah, out back, also have the Bimmer World ultralight rear wing. It is a super rigid piece as well. Not chassis mounted, but just how these feet are with all the attachment points and how wide they are. This is all carbon, the end plate, the risers, everything, and it's rigid. And this is mounted to a carbon Kevlar trunk that I got from my buddy James Pate. I just love James, so thank you for helping me get the sub 50. But yeah, you can see
Oh man, that's nice. It's high quality.
Pretty cool, yeah. I filled in some of the holes that were in there, and then the rest is just drilled in. Again, yeah, super, super light. So all makes a difference.
Cool. Speaking of the weight, what does it weigh right now?
So right now with a half tank, it weighs 3,030 pounds. We got garbage trucks now. We got it all here in Long Beach. We got planes. Yeah, so yeah, 3,030 pounds is not light by race car standards maybe, but by E9X M3 standards, it's impressive because there's still a lot in the car that we could take out. I mean, we brought up our buddy James. I think his car is right around 3,000. That thing is Lexan, fully gutted, fully caged, no AC, no headlights, no anything. And my car's only 30 pounds heavier. So not to shit on my boy, but
Well,
just saying the manual car and then this one for whatever reason it's just pretty light because we can cut the rear deck lid out, we can do the full cage, we can thin the wiring harness, I could do a carbon dash, get rid of the AC, get rid of the headlights. There's so much more if I wanted to go down that path, but I like it being streetable. Look, I mean, obviously it's a race car, but I have no problem driving it to like Angeles Crest or go do like Cars and Coffee or drive it to the track.
right.
So.
What about power?
So power, it makes about 400 at the wheels,
Okay.
even, which again, modern day standards, like that is not a lot of power. But the way the power is delivered and how consistent it is I think what makes it a really surprisingly competitive, package
Right.
and platform. 400 wheel is also nothing to sneeze at, again, for this car. So just back to like what I realized and what I do is it's a very small formula of parts. It's actually the most affordable thing you could do to the car, is doing the power package to get to where I'm at. But people like to just buy a bunch of random stuff.
Wow.
But yeah, this is it. I mean, it looks kind of gnarly, but there's not a whole lot done to the engine. This Turner carbon airbox and intake setup is giant. It is lighter than the factory pieces, and most of all, it's sound. I mean, ITBs through thin wall carbon is like heavenly. And then mine in particular revs to about 8,700 RPM. That's the intake setup. Then we run the Mach-Schnell underdrive pulleys, which again, like growing up you hear underdrive pulleys and I always thought they were just like a joke to steal your money. And I didn't know, but the pulleys make a huge difference on this car. You pair that with an upgraded X-pipe, obviously remove some of the stuff that is very street friendly, free up the exhaust flow, and you're on your way. But we top it all off with a full custom calibration from Epic Motorsport. And Randy, who runs Epic, tunes race cars. That's the big difference between Randy and a lot of other tuners. I see a lot of people running stuff that came from someone who's just hanging in their garage or figured it out or does like road tuning, and not knocking it. I'm sure it all works, but I've also seen people have issues on track, have temperature issues, have power delivery issues, motor issues, like this is a crazy expensive, small displacement, high rev V8. So for me, it's not something to skimp on. I don't run ethanol, I don't run any of that stuff because it wasn't designed for it and it wreaks havoc on your fuel system. No desire to, it'll either be 91 octane or just real race gas. The car makes power every single time and it has 110,000 miles on it and still makes the power.
Is the engine bone stock as far as internal goes?
Yeah, internal is bone stock. You could replicate this setup in less than a day. Some of the special stuff that I helped develop was mostly driven by weight. The exhaust is super heavy, and the only real light option out there was the Acura, which is very expensive, comes with catalytic converters, and it is a nice piece. I don't love the sound. Somehow Acura designs exhausts that sound awesome on almost every other car. It became famous on this one, I think, for the German roads and maybe meeting sound regulations, but for me it's too quiet, it's too muffled. A proper stainless exhaust in this car sounds so good. But they weigh a ton. What I had on here was a Mach-Schnell X-pipe, which again, part of the power package that I offer includes that as like the step one. But if you want to go for the lightest version, then I collaborated with the fabricator in Washington and we make our own titanium X-pipe, and it only weighs 8 pounds. So the Mach-Schnell piece weighs 28 pounds and the stock piece, I don't even know. But we have the absolute lightest X-pipe solution and we can offer it in forward and standard placement for the X, which kind of changes the pitch and a little bit of the torque delivery. Then I paired that with an Acura rear section, which I just found. That was the lightest one I could find. Still don't love the way it sounds, but we are just about finished with the rear section that's going to complete that package, and it should sound awesome.
What about cooling? You mentioned cooling with the E92s, and I hear that a lot too.
Yeah. A lot of people struggle with cooling on these cars, and again, it's the DCT cars in particular, they do run hotter. The DCT needs its own cooling system as well, and it just adds heat to be generated to that kind of setup. There is a reason that the hood is vented, and I combined all the venting with everything CSF offers. So that is CSF radiator, oil cooler, trans cooler, and power steering cooler. And yeah, the car never gets hot. In my 3-ish years of ownership, I've only seen the temperature warning light come on for water temp one time, and that was a couple months ago at Laguna Seca, where I did a full 25-minute session, hot lap after hot lap after hot lap, and I think I did 15 hot laps straight at Laguna, seeing red like I just was having the time of my life. But I pounded on the car for a really long time, and I finally saw that warning light. But even that is still drivable, like no limp mode. I've never had any of that stuff happen on this car. And now that I have a Solo 2DL to data log, the temps are unreal. Like water temp is in the 200s, low 200s, and oil temp is like 220. So
I see the MCS canisters.
yeah. So this car actually started out with the MCS one-way non-remote. In my 1 Series, I had a 2-way remote setup right off the bat, and that was my first time working with MCS, and I was like, that's what race suspension feels like. I literally didn't know. I ran a lot of other brands before that, and I mean, I had fun and had success on track, but I just didn't know what I was missing. But when I got to the S's for the first time with that setup, you know, button wheel, I was like, holy shit. I felt like I was in a trophy truck. Like you're just like cruising over these crazy bumps and undulations, and I'm like, this is unreal. But once I got rid of that car, again, kind of scaling back, I was like, I want to see what I could do with very, very little. So I'm like, let me do the most entry-level setup I can get from MCS, which is a one-way, non-remote setup, and I went for it. And honestly, I ran a 51 with this car on 275 street tires with the one-ways. You know, I've shaved time off. The car is definitely more consistent now, but I upgraded the one-ways, which is, I think, even cooler. They're totally modular, and only MCS works on MCS, which, like, some people look at that and they're like, I want to be able to get it serviced anywhere, but fact is they can maintain quality control. I love that. So I sent my one-ways to MCS in Atlanta, and they sent them back to me a week later as 3-way remote dampers. Wild, like so cool. Once I did that, it opened up a whole new world of kind of tuning and tinkering and canister pressure, low speed compression, high speed compression, rebound adjustability. It's been a journey, but I really love learning about this stuff. I mean, I spend a lot of nights reading about chassis setup and end up on European websites just with engineers talking about control of dampers and springs and all of it. I love this stuff, but the 3-way remote setup is unreal.
Are these custom spec'd or are they off the shelf?
This is how you would get them. They are an off-the-shelf valve setup for the E92 and E90, weight and geometry there.
Okay.
So the thing that ends up being custom is what you do with canister pressure, and then the settings, with all those knobs, and then of course spring rates and alignment. So spring rates are something that I spent a lot of time working on, and again is I think a very specific and integral part of making this car work the way it does, and why I tell people not to buy coilovers that just come in a box. Like it's better to kind of figure out where you're going, how you're driving, what tires you're using, and then kind of go from there.
Well, what are the spring rates on it now?
I've never even told anyone.
Oh.
No, it's nothing super crazy. Right now I run a 700 front and 1100 rear divorce. So a lot of people do true rear on these cars. I just didn't, these coilovers weren't built that way. I could change them to that, but I don't really see a point, and the car works really well divorced, so I played a lot. I mean, I ran 600, 900 for a long time, and the car was amazing like that without aero. Once I started pushing harder with some of the aero stuff, I felt like the car needed more platform, and I tried a 700, 1000 setup, and the car was understeering way too much. But yeah, I've tried a lot of different rates on this car, and I'm still tinkering, without having a front splitter, creating a ton of front downforce. I've needed to, I just like a car that rotates, man.
Right.
So once I put a wing on the car, I did a GT4 wing at first, and the car actually felt the most fun at that stage, which was this lip and a smaller, lower GT4 wing. Looked super cool, looked like a ring car, and was a joy to drive. It had all of the qualities of the non-aero car, but just like a little bit more balance and downforce. And like, as a driver, that's the setup every day. But if you want to break records or start competing, you need more aero. But once I put that wing on the car, I kind of shaved a lot of time off. I lost all of that front grip, and the car wasn't rotating the way I wanted it to anymore, and I just wasn't having as much fun driving it. It literally has taken me a year to get it to where it's just a fucking joy. Like I love driving this car, man. And it rotates anytime I ask it to now.
Yeah.
And like people always see that in the videos and think that's the slow way around the corner, and like maybe, but for me it's not slower than just fucking understeer and hoping the front works. So like I'd rather just manage with throttle and get a little angle.
What about the sway bar setup and the arms?
So this runs the full arm package. It's everything you could have from SPL. I mean, you can kind of ruin your car very easily with a lot of adjustability, but you can also dial in some very, very specific characteristics. Getting rid of all of that soft, mushy stuff that comes on the car from the factory makes a huge difference. For me, the full front SPL kit widens the track and corrects the roll center, and that is that wild amount of front grip, more steering angle, and just handles everything. Every bushing and mount on the car has been replaced and upgraded either for solid or close to it. Sway bars, I don't like adjustable sway bars on this car. On this car, you have to drop the entire rear subframe to put a rear sway bar in. I mean, you can kind of skid around it a little bit and like lower it and snake in there, but they are bigger, sometimes heavier, sometimes they contact the springs or end links and cause issues. I've seen people break them in half, like it's tough. And the E92 and E90 chassis cars don't put power down that well. Like new modern cars like A90 Zupra we talked about, like unreal. That car has like twice the amount of torque, 100 more horsepower usually, and somehow you just put your foot on the throttle and it's like, we're good. And I don't get it. It's crazy. That is engineering and science and things advancing, and like the new cars are wild, but the E92 does not do that. So it has taken a lot of spring rate time and damper selection and tires and all of that to get it to put down power the way I want it to, including a diff. But the thing is, when you put a really big rear sway bar on the car, you're kind of removing mechanical grip.
Yeah.
We all go to Button Willow, which is full of dust and cow shit, and people wonder, like, why isn't my car working there? Well, you put crazy stiff springs on, you have your sway bars that are adjustable and max stiff, and who knows, dude? Like, you need the compliancy. So I tried a bigger front bar because people say McPherson front struts setups like a stiff bar, especially maintain camber, you know, in high compression turns. But again, yeah, I didn't like it. I thought it would add understeer, and for me, it did add understeer. I didn't see any positive attributes about it. I pulled it out. Stock bars for life, dude.
Got it. Yeah, I guess next is brakes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the AP Pro 5000R full brake kit, front and rear. They're massive 6-piston calipers up front, and this is the endurance caliper, so it runs a 25 millimeter thick pad. So you just really don't ever need to change them. They are incredible. I've run some other brakes on this car and have relationships with some other brake companies, but I did struggle with a lot of knockback on this setup. Once I went to the AP setup, all the knockback was gone. They just happen to be way harder to bleed. So literally up until the sub 50 lap, I was struggling with my braking performance and wanting to go back to my smaller 4-piston setup from StopTech. But we bled the system for like an 8th time, found more bubbles, and this time they were incredible. Yeah, they just work. The nice thing is they're also really light, so the rear setup alone shaves like almost 30 pounds from factory.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what kind of pads?
Right now I am running the Ferodo DS 3.12s. They honestly come with the kit. I'm not in love with their feeling, but I got these from a friend and I've just been running it. I was on the verge of swapping out and trying new rotors and new pad compounds, and I might do that later, but it turned out to just be the bleeding issue. So now that they're bled, I don't know, I'm not like, you know, I have a good feel for my car and a good feel for braking, but I also sometimes just want to drive. So like if I'm having trouble just driving, like I can't tell you what it needs. I just get annoyed, you know, like I'm like, well, brakes don't work. Front's not working, whatever. Like I start to want to mess around, but yeah, now that they work, I can just drive around it. As long as they work, I'm good.
Yeah, let's talk about the wheels
Yeah.
and tire setup.
So I have 2 sets of wheels. I mean, life is just a little easier like that when you're going to the track all the time and you want fresh tires for PBs. So yeah, these are Apex forged VS5 RS. And kind of like I was talking about before, most people just run what they think they can run because of what everyone else is doing. This is actually an 18 by 11 square setup, which most people do not even try to do. I can't say it's my ultimate recommendation because it takes a little bit of commitment, and you have to be happy with pretty tight tolerances. But for me, I wanted to maximize the contact patch, and all the new modern 200 treadwear tires are so wide that when I started going up to a 295 series tire on a 10.5-inch wide wheel, I just wasn't happy with the feel. Like I missed that sidewall rigidity, and I missed the response that I had running a 275, on an 18 by 10.5. For me, it's either 275s on 10.5 or a 295 on an 11. So once I went to the 11s, they're 18 by 11 front and rear. This particular sub 50 spec setup is actually a 295/30 front and a 295/35 rear. And it's a Bridgestone RE71 RS. Not sponsored by Bridgestone. I wish I was. These are my favorite 200 treadwear tires by far. I just haven't found anything that performs like they do. I've never tried to run a slick or anything in that world, maybe one day, but I do like the 200 treadwear kind of street class category. It's taken me a bit to figure out what that tire size would be, but it worked.
I heard they last a while too.
They last a while. I mean, that's a funny thing. Like, tires can visually last a while, but they could feel like complete. So these do last a while and they continue to perform. I could happily go to any other track and drive on old tires, but when I go to Buttonwillow, I've had so many laps there and I think I push so much harder there with very little left on the table that I know instantly if I'm not at like optimal. Whether that is ambient temperature, track condition, tire health, like I know it instantly because I have so many laps there that I can gauge it. Like if I come in and I'm 2 seconds slower than I usually am, then I know something's not right today. Like there's no point in pushing. So usually I'll need fresh rubber there to go set a record. Could I show up to Buttonwillow again and run a 49 on these? I think I could actually, but I don't know if I would improve, past what I did.
Transmission, obviously manual.
Yeah.
You have a CAE. Let's talk about the drive shaft and differential.
Up until recently, I hadn't touched the clutch or the drive shaft. They were both stock with 110,000 miles on them, which again, BMW, like people say these cars are like unreliable, money pits, but like I haven't had to do anything. I did the rod bearings once, changed the injectors because I heard of a bad story of someone hydrolocking their motor because the injectors leaked or something. It's all I had to do maintenance wise. Yeah, I was struggling with shifting, as quickly as I wanted to. And I know that there's a lot of weight to free up in the drivetrain, so I went with a TTV twin disc clutch setup. Wild looking, I'll send you some photos, but it shaved 14 pounds from the stock clutch and flywheel assembly, and the twin discs are smaller discs too. So the moment of inertia is even, less than before, which is really what makes the shifts now feel super smooth and quick. And then while we were in there and things were out and I was making the car lighter, I also threw in a carbon fiber drive shaft, which shaved another 11 pounds from the stock drive shaft. And I was worried about doing that because I abuse my car nicely, but I shift hard and I don't have a lot of mechanical sympathy. So I like overbuilding everything so I can beat of it and push it and not worry. Carbon drive shaft, we'll see how it goes. So far so good, but shaving 20 plus pounds from the drivetrain is crazy. Heel toe downshifting now, just like the response is wild. And then all the power goes to a custom spec Drexler differential with the BMW Motorsport 410 final drive. That is really, if you want your car doing close to what this one does, the dampers, the arms, and the diff will give you the best base to build off of. From there, you make it lighter, add a little power, learn how to drive. But like those 3 things, and then brakes, sorry, you need the brakes. Those 4 things, and you will have a car that surprises you.
Is this a full carbon door or?
No, so
just
steel door, and then this is a carbon door card. Again, like trying to fit into street class rules, I went with a 1x1 copy of the OEM door card and fit it to the car and ran, the switches and a pull and everything. I think it would probably pass tech for, some of those series. But yeah, I love them. I love matte carbon specifically. So these are from Latvia. Huge pain in the ass to install, but they do shave a lot of weight, and obviously the car has no radio or anything, so bare bones. And then inside, again, I really love the factory motorsport built cars. So after only recently, finally pulling out my headliner and pulling out the rest of the carpet, I scraped off every piece of sound deadening I could find in the car, with a heat gun and a putty knife. Then I bought Alpine white paint in a can and clear coat and got rid of all the, you end up with squares where all the sound deadening used to be, and that stuff kills me. So I painted everything white, cleaned it up, and actually gutted my stock center console and made it as light as I possibly could to put it back in the car, because I just think, yeah, when it's not in there, it just makes the interior look like shit to me, and I couldn't live with it. So I sacrificed the 6 pounds and put it back in.
Nice. No e-brakes, huh?
That is one thing. I mean, you didn't ask me if I have any regrets, but it's not worth it, dude. It's not worth it. I probably could have substituted having the e-brake.
I agree with you.
Yeah, it did weigh 11 pounds, and I was like, I'm so determined to get to that sub 3,000 goal for no real reason. I just think it's cool. So, but not having the e-brake fucking sucks, man. If you drive anywhere in the street, if you load it onto a trailer without a winch, if you just anything, you know. It's a really cool feature that's come on cars forever, and this one doesn't have it anymore. And I don't know if I can put it back in. So that's that. But yeah, then I run a Sparco Evo seat with Sparco harnesses, Mach Schnell Club Sport seat mount without sliders. Again, weight savings. A Carbon Tech carbon foot tray with a dead pedal that does help. It's not ideal, but without the carpet and factory dead pedal, you're definitely left wondering where to put your left foot when it's not on the clutch.
This is nice.
It's in there, yeah. It's. Sometimes I install stuff that I didn't think I could do. Like I don't like drilling through metal and putting rivets in and all of those things. And I'm like, I get really happy when it works out. So I like tinkering in the garage and figuring it all out. And then. Yeah, and then it's a Pinnacle Motorsport bolt-in T45 GTS style half cage.
Nice.
But now without a headliner and without door panels, you're like, well, that's not the tightest gap. So ultimately, I think the next thing for the car will be getting a full cage installed and thinning out the wiring harness. Looks
like it had something in the front too.
So this was a surprise after I bought the car, and I started looking at, you know, in the glove box and trunk, I found a NASA logbook. And I was like, what? But no races had been logged. The car had a weld-in cage at some point. I don't think it was ever tracked. I think it was like a showpiece for some dealer, because the guy I bought it from actually sent me a picture, and it had like vinyl on it and was just sitting in a showroom with like yellow headlights and a roll cage. Gotcha. I don't think it was like the proper spec for the cage, because there was no hole in the dash there, but there was a hole in the glove box originally, and bad weld marks, and I don't know, questionable history, but I think it was just always meant to be a race car. So I have no worries about, you know, ruining it in someone else's eyes or continue to push it. Like, it was always meant to be this way for me.
It looks beautiful, man. I don't know what you're talking about.
Thanks, man.
You have a lot of wiring still.
Yeah.
Are you planning on doing anything with it, or just?
Yeah, so wiring is one thing that I have no desire to do on my own, because you can definitely brick your car. There are still a lot of electronics that are all running through that system, but again, there's a ton of stuff I'm not using. So it still does have full AC and heat, but without a radio or amp or any of that stuff, I mean, there's a significant amount of wiring we could pull. It's a big job. I got the car to this stage, so now when I decide if and when I do a full cage and want to thin the wiring harness and send it to someone, I mean, I can have the car ready for that in like 25 minutes, literally. Pull that cage out, get the seat out, center console, and like it's ready to go. That will be the next step, but reaching a big time goal of mine, which was that sub 50 lap, I'm not as concerned with further lightening the car as much as I originally was. I mean, I still ultimately will, and I'll do Lexan as well. But yeah, from here on out, it's like, okay, keep pushing as a driver, find out where that time is, because clearly the car has the pace. I think there's more time in it though, with some small adjustments and better driving. So
like that approach.
Now I just want to run a 48 on street tires. So we'll get there, and then we'll keep slowly, you know, trimming weight and changing things. But overall, it's pretty good.
Okay. A couple questions, Alex.
Yeah.
First one is, what does sub 2 mean to you?
My first time going to Buttonwillow, I went with my buddy Vinny and Brandon Cotto on a Hoonigan field day trip, and we naively showed up to GTA. At that time, it was called Super Lap Battle. Now it's Final. So we showed up to Super Lap Battle, and we asked the guys at GTA to you know, let us like take part in the day, and they're like, yeah, come on out, make your video, enjoy. We had no idea what we were getting ourselves into, man. We were literally like went out into open practice, having never been on that track, none of us even being like super confident with our cars or driving abilities. And I realized that there was like this barrier that everyone was talking about. Like, oh, did you sub 2? Did you sub 2? No way you'll sub 2 your first time, this and that. And I'm like, I found this so hilarious. And then I realized like, oh wow, it's so crazy to think about this barrier of time and put it on a pedestal, and it just psychs you out. You know, people just give up everything and they push so hard, they crash, they do whatever just to like reach the goal. Yeah, sub 2 to me was just that level of intensity, and my dipping my toes into timeattack and realizing what this community was. And I'm like, why do people even like it up here? Like, it smells terrible, it's far, it's not near anything, not a nice looking track, but like there are these barriers, and like it has this kind of pedigree and history and all these stories, and people come from all over the country and sometimes the world to go drive Buttonwillow, and like I think it's hilarious, man.
What things about life do you learn through cars?
Really, honestly, I've never even thought about
take
what
your
cars
time.
have taught me about life. 'Cause truthfully, it's hard. I guess cars have to teach you patience and self-control, because I think we see a lot of people who struggle with that, because I really do think that this is a kind of a sick addiction in a lot of ways. And you can just lose sight of like what things cost time-wise or money-wise and all of it. So definitely taught me a lot about patience. Yeah.
Okay. Any shout-outs?
Shout outs, man. I'm just seriously so like, I'm just grateful for everyone that's ever kind of supported what I do. All the brands I work with, anyone who's been behind me trying to start Sub 2 and lend an ear to advise me, you know, along the way. But that list is just way too long. But thank you to everyone.
Yeah. Any final thing you want to say?
Go to the track. Yeah, that's all I think about. All I think about is going and pushing harder. So see you out there.
All right. For you guys with BMWs and Supras, go check out Alex's website. I'll link it below. Thank you for your time, Alex. We'll see you again.
Thanks, dude.